Hi, my name is Charlie, and I'm an alcoholic. And the moment you've been waiting for. I want to thank Gloria for asking me to participate at this meeting. This is really, really an honor because I know a lot of people in this room, and many of you have been strong influences in my sobriety, whether you know it or not. And I am a product of whatever is happening in this room today. I'm the outcropping of that, or one of the outcroppings of that, so blame yourself. On behalf of Carol, I want to just mention Clancy, because Carol didn't. And I really appreciate being scheduled to follow Johnny and Clancy and Harvey. That's always a nice thing. I've got 14 years of sobriety. It's like it registers like a fart on the Richter scale when you get right down to it. I had to speak at a meeting. This is several years ago. I had to speak at a meeting, and it was a Friday night meeting, and I went there, and I'd been called the day before to speak there because the other speaker had canceled. So I get there, and the secretary said, our speaker last week was Johnny Harris. And I said, that's great. And next week it's Clancy. So I look on the board, and they got Johnny, crossed from the week before, and then they got Clancy right below my name. I've been hastily scribbled in, and I thought, well, that's great. So the next night I was out with my sponsor, and Maurice Zolotow, who was a great friend of a lot of us, who died about 4 years ago, 20 years sober, and so we were out having dinner and going to a movie or something, and I mentioned it to Maurice. I said, I guess what happened to me last night, I got stuck between Johnny Harris and Clancy. I felt like a blip or a glitch between greatness, and Maurice looked over and said, you shouldn't run yourself down like that, Charlie. You should consider yourself like Christ between the two thieves. God bless Maurice. Can I borrow your watch? I can't read mine. We have a time problem here. Now we don't. Thank you. This was my very first convention. I came here when I wasn't even 90 days sober. And I came up here with my sponsor. I didn't want to be here because I was involved in a deep, meaningful relationship in Los Angeles with a woman who had 120 days sobriety. And I was just following her example, if you know what I mean. And I'm happy to say she's still sober and well. And Julian was here. And this is one of the great things about being here. This is really before the meeting started. Julian said, this is impossible, because we're both about 2 months apart in sobriety. And when I first came around, Julian has more time than I do. And I saw him in a meeting. And I've known Julian since he had a white spot on his hair. And I thought he was a punk rock soul singer when I first came to AA. Sort of Sam and Dave meets the Sex Pistols kind of guy. And I was in awe of Julian because he had 60 days when I got here. And my sponsor, I got a sponsor at about 60 days. I put everything off for 60 days. I wanted to try it myself till I was good and goddamn miserable on my own. And then I could blame it on somebody else after that. So I got a sponsor at the urging of people in my group, because I was brought to the Pacific group by Keith C., who asked me to show up Wednesday night. He didn't know if I'd be there or not, but I thought he'd be looking for me. And I heard him speak at a meeting I was going to down in Orange County, and he suggested that perhaps I was living in Anaheim, and I was going to a meeting in Tustin on Sunday nights. And then I worked in Santa Monica. Now, by the time you drive from Santa Monica back to Anaheim on a weeknight, it's too late to go to a meeting. So I went to meetings on Sunday, because Saturday night, they don't have meetings. That's what I thought. And I didn't want to ask, because somebody might have told me they did, so I just assumed that it was just like church. It's on Sunday, and so I got brought up to this. Keith was speaking at that meeting, and he suggested I come up to meetings on the west side and start going to meetings right by where I worked. It was the most amazing kind of a solution to any. I didn't want to hear it, but it was pretty logical, I thought. So he gave me the address of the synagogue and said, you be there Wednesday night, and I'll look for you. Well, when Keith said he's going to look for you, you really believe he's going to look for you. And I went there, and I looked around. I couldn't find him, because I got there at 8:29, and when it started at 8:30. I left immediately after Amen, as soon as I could wrest my hand free from the person holding on to it, and bolted out of there. And eventually, by the pressure of the people in the group, they sentenced me to get a sponsor. They didn't actually, but I didn't get a sponsor to be sincere either. I got one to shut them up. To shut up. Everybody would run up and say, you get a sponsor yet, Charlie? I'd say no, and I have to explain why I don't have a sponsor. And eventually I got a sponsor named Bill, and Bill's been my sponsor for the last 14 years. And Bill was coming up to this convention, and we were coming up there wasn't a hotel here at the time. There was just a big parking lot out there, and we came up in an RV. Now, my sponsor is 6'5". we came up with a guy named Bob and another guy named George, whose RV it was. These big, huge guys, and we're all going to sleep in this RV in the parking lot, which was a bad thing for me because I'm an only child. I don't like sharing space or air or anything. And I'm also a quiet sleeper, and the inside of this RV sounded like something outside of nature. It was really... It was like sleeping in the landing gear of a plane, really. And there were probably about 5,000 people at this convention, and I got panicked. I mean, I was brought into this place, and I panicked. I didn't know what to do. My sponsor seemed to know everybody. He was dragging me around to the hospitality suite and dragging me around to things, and I just got so intimidated by people. All I could do was just run out and try to hide in a corner, because I don't do people very well. I have a problem with the human race. That's just a little hurdle I've had to jump, and... So it was getting more and more miserable, and I know if you're new here today and this is your first convention, I know that someone sitting out there is just aching to get out of here. Please, please, I don't know how to get home. I'm in Bakersfield, for God's sake, with a bunch of sober alcoholics, and everything's wonderful, and everybody's really sentimental, and people are weeping at the speakers. I'm sitting there trying to keep my teeth from breaking during the meetings, and I'm horrified at the conviviality and the calmness that people have, and I just detest, it was just awful. And then we go out, and I had to play cards with them in this RV, and I stepped off and tried to get some sleep while they all played cards. So I was just in misery at this thing, and all I could think about was getting out of here, because at that point, if you're like I am, no matter how well you think you are, you need a drink. And I was 90 days sober, and I needed a drink. I knew that might work again. I'd had 90 days clean and sober. I could probably go back and get a little jump or jolt from it. But I was feeling so terrible, and I swore. I make all kinds of resolutions when I'm in misery too. I don't know about anybody else, but I resolved to do lots of things. And one of those resolutions was, I'm never, ever, ever coming to a convention again. I will never. Are you understanding me? I will never do that. That's not what came out of my mouth. I'd say things like, see you next year, But I knew I was not going to do that. And it was Sunday morning, and I thought, oh, criminy, we can get out of here. The sun is coming up. Let's start this RV and get out of this godforsaken place. Please, please, take me home. I want to go home. I want to be back there, and they wanted to come to this meeting. It was the spiritual meeting, as it was called, as opposed to, I don't know what, the animal, vegetable, and mineral meetings the day before. So I got hauled into this thing, and I got dragged. It was almost like being, I don't know, I don't have kids, but I've watched people with kids try to get them to move when they don't want to move, and they do that dropping arm, and they spin around. And my sponsor was, let's go, and we came in here, and it was packed, and we couldn't find any seats in here. And we had to sit. We sat way up in the farthest corner up there, and I all the way up. I want to go up here. I just want to go. Can I just go sit in the RV, please? Just let me sit out there. I won't make any noise. I'll be good. And I'm a 30-year-old blubbering man, and we went up there, and this guy named Gene was speaking that morning, and Gene has died since in the last couple of years. And I sat up there, and I listened to this guy, and I started laughing, and he was talking about his father, and I had a lot of problems in dealing with things about my father that I've been shoving down for years, and I listened to Gene talk about his dad and talk about how Alcoholics Anonymous gave him the same sense of confidence and the same sense of comfort as he felt when he stood on the corner holding his father's hand and waiting for the light to change, waiting to go across the street, that he knew that he was safe and he knew that he was here to be safe. And something happened to me, something happened listening to Gene that changed my entire perception of how everything looked around here. It just altered the way I felt about myself and altered my way. And like Clancy said this morning, it turned everything from blue to red all of a sudden without any effort on my own except sitting, and somehow I listened. And my life changed, And I realized maybe a little bit at that point that maybe this thing would work. I still want to go home. But I walked out to the parking lot shaking people's hands and feeling happy to be around you and feeling comfortable in your midst just because good people who had my best interests in mind made me stay when I wanted to get the hell out of here. And that has been my experience since I've been sober. Now, I'm like Hank, I don't have much of a story. I wish I'd done a lot more when I was out there. I could have, and I thought about it, but, I'm a one-issue guy. I'm just an alcoholic. I don't have any other I have other issues, but my sponsor chooses to call them defects of character, which is really, I think, short-sighted, but, I'll go along with it because he's big and he's loud, and he's testy sometimes, too, which is annoying. I have to go to his sponsor for compassion. That'll tell you something. And I just never expected to be an alcoholic. I had bigger aspirations than this. I wanted to be rich and famous and irresistible to women. And I don't think that's asking too much. I think a lot of people ask for a lot more and get it. I've seen that happen. So I thought I was being remarkably humble in what I was asking for. But I guess that's not so. But I can't read this either. Oh, it's upside down. There, that's better. I can smell it in here. I've smelled it in a lot of AA meetings. You see, take a whiff, you can smell potential. It drifts around in AA. You can smell it because people don't tend to use it. They just exude it, like sweat. It just kind of leaks out. And I've had potential all my life, tons of it. I choose to keep it. I don't want to throw it all away at once. I'm like the kid with the little toy friction car. I just keep pushing it on the ground, pushing it. Someday, when I let this thing go, it is going to rip. It is really going to take off. But I'm not letting it go yet. Listen to those wheels. When I finally let this sucker go, it's going. Just not today. And as long as I never have to let it go, I never have to know how far it didn't go. So I just keep holding on to it, And I'm like Hank, and I'm like a lot of alcoholics. I'm a procrastinator. I'm a quiet, passive guy who has a lot of hostile feelings toward the world, especially toward well-meaning high school counselors and priests who would always tell my parents about my potential. Tell me, there's either a priest or a high school counselor in here. We go into they always call my parents in the office and say, Charles has such potential, we just don't understand why he doesn't do anything with it. My reaction is always the same. I've got it. Now I know I've got it. Now they know I've got it. We all know I've got it. Now why don't you just back the hell off? Why don't you go and smear your foolish concern on somebody else, Leave me alone because I'm not going to leap at your command. I don't jump for your cue. I am an individual. I have my own speed and my own desires and my own life to live. Now why don't you get the hell out of my face and go bother somebody else, If you were such hot stuff, you wouldn't be a high school counselor anyway, now would you? Unfortunately, what came out was, I'll try harder. But I have always been one I've always been the one who's walked through life like this, just like this, but I don't have the courage to actually do this. So I walk through life like this. I don't have the cojones to really actually do this, Some of you actually do this. You're the ones who did time. I'm always about 3 thoughts away from a rooftop and an automatic weapon. But what happened was that somewhere down the line, with all that anxiety and all that anger and all that fear and all that, I got to tell you, I don't have alcoholic parents. My dad was a humble carpenter. My mom was a virgin woman. I grew up in this pristine environment with my dad was always trying to help. My dad had been a DI in the Marines for 8 years. And I'm sure he was quite disappointed with what fell off the limb as far as his family tree went. But because at the time when I got out of high school, I was 6'2" of 129 pounds of throbbing testosterone and ambition with no idea how to use it and just percolating with potential. I just was revved up with it, but I couldn't do anything with it. I went to college at 17. I got out at 30, and I had and you laugh, but let's see a show of hands on how many people got out in that 4 years, and if you did, you're probably just anal retentive. It's going to be a real spiritual talk, isn't it? Yeah, you're going to walk out of here being closer to God, I got a feeling. My parents tried to marshal all of their resources to help me to do things. My father, was just a loving man. I couldn't relate to him. He had a 5th grade education, and my mom didn't have a whole lot more than that. And they were hardworking people and had suffered a lot of setbacks and a lot of things in their life to finally have a son. My mother had 3 children, 2 before me and 1 after, and they'd all died at birth. And I was the sacred event at that house. I'd clear my throat, and immediately we'd be scrubbed down for surgery in the house. I didn't even know Christmas trees were real until I was about 20, and we had these non-allergenic Christmas trees and all this, just all this stuff, and I was sick a lot, and I would sit at home and watch TV and read books and just try to dream about what people were really like. I didn't want to be around people. I don't like people. I don't want you to, I just don't, that feeling, just touch me. Just don't touch me. And I've been that way all my life. I don't say it, but I just act that way. Don't. Put your hands on, I don't want to hug. I don't want my aunts. I came from a really huggy, kissy family. My dad had 15 brothers and sisters, and you go over to their house, and it's just constant licking the side of your face, these big aunts, and hugging and all that stuff, and I hate that, I'm not now. I'm a full contact guy now, but I don't mind hugging. I don't like Hollywood hugs. If you're going to hug me, for God's sake, just give me a good hug. Don't do that, pull your thing away and pat me on the back like that. Just hug me, hug me. I don't care if we touch. Don't flatter yourself. Nothing's going to happen. But if you're going to do it, commit, for God's sake. If you're just say, I want to hug, I'll hug. I don't care. I'm not going to throw up or run in terror or anything like I would have. But so I grew up like that, and I felt isolated and more isolated and more isolated from people until I went to a party one night, which was a real event because, there are people at a party, and I was there with people at this party, and by this time I'd gone through the music industry. I'd been a clerk in a record store for a while, but I got into the motorcycle business at the height of Easy Rider fame. It was the late 60s, and I started working at this motorcycle place, and they invited me to a party one time because I was a new guy, and we went there, and there were bikers and car club people and all these odd group of people there, and I looked pretty much like I do now, just a dork, and they were nice to me, I guess they sort of took me as their mascot. The only thing I was missing was one of those big chicken heads, but there I was at this party, and somebody gave me a can of malt liquor. Now, up until this point, I had no interest in drinking. I had no interest. I thought I had a moral objection to alcohol. I thought people who drank alcohol were weak. That's how I felt about everything in my life. Whatever you did was a weakness. I had cut myself off from so many different ways to do anything that anything anybody else did that looked like it made them have fun irritated me. But I couldn't tell you about it, which is fine with me because that's about as close as I ever got to aerobics, was that kind of stress of watching other people be happy and hating them for it, but not being able to tell them, just walk around and button it up and smile and play the game. And I got this can of malt liquor, and I drank this can of malt liquor, and I had a religious experience. Truly, I don't say that to be sarcastic or anything. I had what I believe to be a complete change inside that first drink. Some of us, some alcoholics drink for a period of time and cross over the invisible line, and I didn't. I catapulted into alcoholism with that first drink. I felt like I had finally been freed, that I had finally found a way to connect with you. I liked you. Everything about you seemed to become more appealing. I liked being around you. I felt all my potential filling itself as I stood there. I could just feel it pouring in, that it was going to happen. Alcohol gave me the satisfaction of a job well done without ever having to do a damn thing. Why mess up your buzz? Just drink and forget the rest. And I felt so good. I heard a guy speak at our home group meeting a couple of months ago who said that when he drank, he wanted to run outside and just howl at the moon. And that's exactly how I felt. I felt so relieved that something had finally filled up that yearning that I had experienced up until that point. I was 18 years old, and I had had this yearning for years, a sense of this hunger that I didn't know what to fill it with. And I tried all the things you try to fill hunger with, food, acquisition, sex, sleep, whatever you use to make, and when you feel something you want to, and it's chafing you, you want to try to find some way to fix it. And I couldn't find any way to fix it. And I was a loner and an isolated person, and I drank. I couldn't wait to drink again after that. Later that night, I went into a blackout that night, incidentally, and after, I don't know which one I went into a blackout after, but I drank about 6 of those malt liquors, and wound up coming out of a blackout, running alongside of a friend of mine's car, going through Silverado Canyon in Orange County, holding onto the door handle, throwing up in the wind, and laughing my ass off. Because I'd been there. And if you are an alcoholic, I know that you know where there is. I can see it on your faces. Only alcoholics understand when you've been there. Because once you've been there, you don't want to be anywhere else. And when you're away from there, the only thing that kept me stable was the idea that I'm going back as soon as I am done here, doing whatever here is, but I'm going there. And I went there at the Humdinger in Anaheim. I went there at the Shimmy Shack in Garden Grove. I don't know if that's still there. It was one of those places where they changed the jukebox with someone's face, E5. It was brutal, but it was home. And I know I would sit at the elbow of the bar at the Humdinger, and it was it was everything the name implies. And it had an elbow at the bar, and I would sit at the elbow of the bar, and I would look at everybody sitting there, all the astronauts and the surgeons and the specialists and the people who were in the State Department and all the diplomats and stuff, and I could see myself in the back bar mirror, you know? And that's all you need, really, is a reflective surface and more of us doing it. Because I felt so connected to everybody in that bar. I felt like we had knowledge that they don't have. We have insights that they only dream of. We have aspirations that they will never be able to fulfill. They need us, but they're going to have to come in here and get us. And I never said a word to anybody in that bar, but I felt like linking arms, you know, singing "We Are the World," rocking back and forth. And meanwhile, I'm trying to pass myself off as an intellectual, which is not a big challenge. If you got a big forehead and glasses, you're an intellectual in most camps. At least in the Humdinger, that did it. And I was a fraud. I've lived my life as a fraud. I always put out something that I was not because I couldn't bear to let you know what I really felt inside or who I really was. And I put that mask out there. And when I drank, for some inexplicable reason that I still don't understand, alcohol filled the gap between me and that mask and made me really believe that what I was putting out there was actually me. This is really me. And then over the years, as I drank more and more and became a daily drinker and had been a compulsive drinker since the beginning, gradually alcohol stopped having that effect, and it started leaving a little vacant space between me and the mask, until pretty soon, on the 11th of June of 1981, I was dying inside. I wanted to commit suicide, and not the dramatic suicide, because, you know, I'd done all that stuff. I'd sat down on drunken nights on New Year's Eve watching angels with dirty faces on TV in black and white, you know, in my little one-room apartment, because by this time I got a theory about this. It's brilliant, so stick with it. It's I think every alcoholic yearns to have that little one-room apartment, the one where you can stand in the middle and touch all four walls from one spot, and you stand there. And we've all lived in converted garages, or a lot of us have, or we've always wanted to. And I believe that's why alcoholics do time really well, because in a little tiny space like that, in a little tiny apartment, in a little hovel, I've got some power. I got some power over the way things are going to happen in there, you know? It's not out of my control, and I can drink, and I can really get myself together in there. Because when I walk outside the door, I seize up. I don't know how, or how it happens, or why. I just get so uncomfortable around you and so hopelessly fearful of what's going to happen because I don't know what to do, that I need a drink, because alcohol gives me the feeling that I do know what to do. It gives me a sense of power. It allows me to feel powerful when I drink. And the sad thing is, and I think the tragedy of alcoholism is that when we are feeling that sense of power and we are at our most dangerous to ourselves and other people, there is no way you can tell me that it's a problem, because it is not a problem. It is not the problem. And when it's working for me, you're out of your mind. You know, I taught high school in sobriety, and I remember we had Alcohol Awareness Week at high school. Yeah, it's really like, you know, whizzing in the wind, that's for sure. But we had to go along with it because it was one of those faculty things. Just go along with it. I never broke my anonymity. I never told anybody about my drinking or anything. I just went along with it. And it's just because the kids, you can spot the alcoholics. I mean, they look like Todd, actually. And you can usually spot them. They stand out because their desk is usually empty, so when they're there, you're really surprised that they're there. And if you've got them first or second period, you can just scratch them for the day. And we would have these alcohol things. All the non-alcoholic kids are really interested in alcoholism. And all the kids for whom alcohol is working, it's not a problem. They're not even interested in hearing about it. It's boring. I drank. What do you need to tell me about all that stuff for? It works for me. I'm not an alcoholic. I feel great when I drink. I feel ennobled when I drink. I feel like I am going to become something useful when I drink. Just not today. It's imminent, though. I can smell it. You know, it's in the air, and so I got to drink more because I got to get there, and I got to find her. You know, we're pronoun people in AA. We understand who her is with a capital H, her, without even having to hear it spelled. We just know it's capital H, because if I have her, then that'll be it. And once I have it, I won't have to be living in little hovels like this, torturing myself and going to the hospital. And I never stayed at the hospital, mind you, so I got to answer that one on the 20 questions, yes or no, because I had not been hospitalized. I'd been there and treated and left for various and sundry problems that related to my drinking, but they weren't really related to my drinking. It was a lot of stress, but we'll go into that later. But, you know, once I'm there, everything's going to be all right. And I wanted to be a writer. I'll tell you why, because the reason I wanted to be a writer, it was actually, I didn't really want to be a writer, actually. I wanted to be thought of as a writer. There's a little bit of a difference there. And I know just enough to get by. I'm like any typical alcoholic. I have just enough of a dance to make you believe it, that I can do it. And I con myself into wanting to be a writer because nobody ever asks you to write anything, you know, and prove yourself. I mean, if you say you're a musician, there might be a piano in there. And then they'll say, well, go over and play something. And then you're screwed. But I never once had anyone come up with a pencil and say, you're a writer? Here, write something for me. Ever. Never challenged that way, ever. So I was a writer, and I got my Oxford shirt and my tweed jacket at the St. Martin's thrift store, and I would get off my job, because I'd gotten into publishing. I was working my way up. I was a receiving clerk at this bookstore, and I'd get off my job as a receiving clerk, and I'd be all dirty and sweaty, and I'd go home, and this is near the end of my drinking, the last few years of my drinking. Because my drinking was, let me just explain a little bit about my drinking career first. I'm one of those alcoholics who believes that the fastest way down a flight of stairs is to just relax. You know, I am never hurt. I've bled, I have been injured, I've been to the hospital, but never for that long, you know. I'm the kind of alcoholic who wants to meet her at the bar and get my, out my thing going, but I never could quite get out of the living room. I am one of those alcoholics who, by the grace of God, or grace of something, because it doesn't happen for all of us. Let me change that. Not grace at all. I believe it's bum luck that I didn't pull onto the freeway the wrong way one time trying to get onto the freeway and get on the off-ramp and start going down. There were people coming off the freeway who objected to my trying to get on that way and blinked their brights and honked their horns and backed me off of the freeway, almost bumper to bumper, backing me up to get off the freeway. And that's just plug luck, because a lot of us go out there and do that and kill people, kill ourselves. A lot of us die out there doing that, and I don't think that I'm chosen. I don't think anybody in AA is a chosen person. I think we're just damn lucky to be sober. Just lucky, because I don't believe in a God that takes people away. I don't believe God takes people away. And I think that we all get a chance at Him, and we all get a chance to follow Him, and we either take it or we don't. And sometimes it's too hard. Sometimes we're too afraid. And sometimes if we cross paths with someone in AA and they try to help us, we can't hear it because it's just too difficult for us. They don't understand how different we feel. And I would try. By this time, I'd done my drug routine. I've tried drugs. I have my own little drug story. I never liked drugs because they made me high. And I understand that's the point, I suppose. But they didn't. They got me loaded, but I wanted to be there. I don't want to be loaded. I don't want to be smoking marijuana and watching TV till 3 a.m. and then wind up in the kitchen eating ketchup packets. There's a big night. I had a bouillon cube once with the keen rationale that it's crunchy and it tastes like chicken. You can. I'm the guy who calls up his best friend, or whatever best friend happens to be that month, and at 3 a.m. to be taken to the hospital because I'm really sick, because I've been drinking for 3 days. So I'm kind of edgy, not around the clock drinking, but just every single night until finally I just seize up again. I'm not eating. I'm bloated up. I'm sick. I'm peeing blood. I'm throwing up whatever's in there and then some, if you know what I mean. And I'm on deficit barfing at that point, and I'm calling friends. I can't even straighten up, and they take me to the hospital. I'm in the emergency room for a while. They give me Valium. Whoop-de-doo. There's a drug for the ages, Valium. You sit there and just sigh for about 12 hours. Just. And people say, well, what's wrong? Well, nothing. That's the problem. There's nothing wrong. I'm an alcoholic. I don't need to induce psychosis, I don't need to take acid to hallucinate. I just stopped drinking for about 4 days. Things get really interesting. Chipmunks take on a whole new personality, if you know what I mean. And you hear and see things that you never heard before. I don't like that. I don't like hallucinating. I smoked PCP just to be polite, but I didn't like it, And I hallucinate like crazy. And all I can think about is Karen Ann Quinlan. I'm gonna be in a coma, and I'll be sitting in a chair drooling for the rest of my life, and I'll be completely incapacitated except for my ability to think. And there'll be some jackass walking up saying, "Can you hear me?" And it'll take everything I've got to just get that. Of course, I think nothing of drinking till I pass out in the restaurant at Carl's Jr., leaned against the door with it locked and having people for an hour and a half. Hey, open up in there, come on. I'm just dead weight against the door. And then after that, my friends are still drunk and they're still sitting out in the Carl's Jr. waiting for me, And every 5 minutes or so, they go out in the car and drink some more Spinata and come back in, And then I finally come to with someone urinating over my head, in a bathroom. I get out, I go out to the table and sit down, and someone hands me a French fry, and I just heave on the table, All that time I spent in the restaurant, I couldn't get anything together, but the smell of a French fry will inspire you. So anyway, back to being a writer. I would... Remember, I was a writer, and I went up to Maurice Zolotow when I was relatively new. Someone said, Maurice is a writer, so I went to Maurice and said, yeah, I'm thinking of being a writer. And he looks at me and he goes, I'll write something. And he turned around and walked away. Abrupt. Doesn't he know who I'm about to be? So by the end of my drinking, I'd been drinking so much, and it was just not having the same kind of effect. It was misfiring. I was doing the same things that it talks about in the big book, swearing not to drink again, fighting those hangovers. It never occurred to me, it never occurred to me to drink in the morning. How stupid could I got here, and people said, yeah, I used to drink in the morning to get rid of the hangovers. I thought, are you kidding? I used to try to just exert willpower on hangovers, just if I can tough this out, and you're bleeding and hurting, and the wallpaper is shrieking at you, and it's just horrible times, and it gets worse and worse and worse until about 11 o'clock in the morning, and then it goes from getting worse to 1 degree, a little bit better than it had been the moment before, and you think, oh, was I ever stupid to make all those resolutions? What was I thinking of? I'm fine. I am fine. Now I'm gonna have a good lunch, and I'm gonna go out again tonight, and get right down to the humdinger and do whatever I have to do. Or get a bottle of whiskey from Mac's liquor store and go home and see if my wife's there. She's interested in doing something. I was married by this time. I hadn't been married all that time. I was getting back to being a writer. She was interested in this writer. And I would go home from work for my receiving clerk job and put on my writing togs and anoint myself, with the precious oils and go out and get my notebook and my pen because I'm going to go down to the Orr House in Santa Monica. I was living in Santa Monica at the time in Ocean Park, and I'm going to meet her. That's my goal. Now, there's something wonderful about Friday night. There is so much hope in the air for an alcoholic on Friday night, which is completely gone by this time on Sunday, which is amazing to see people at an AA meeting on Sunday morning bright-eyed and happy, because this is the most tortuous time, is Sunday morning, when you realize that all your hopes and dreams from Friday night are gone, and so is all your money. And you have nothing left but a coat hanger and that change between the seats of your car to get whatever it is you need for that day. But I'm going out Friday night, and I'm going to find her, and I go down to the Orr House. I lived about 2 blocks away, and I used to get a police escort home sometimes. I go down to the Orr House, and I'd walk in there and sit down at the bar, and I'd get a couple of shots of Jack Daniels, because I think they were 79 cents at the time, and flip my notebook open and sit there chewing on the end of the pen waiting for her. But then something happened. I got there. And once you've gotten there, who the hell needs her? I mean, it's just... And that, I believe, has been driving women to Al-Anon for years, so... I need you, I need you, I need you. But now I'm there, who are you? Why don't you go find somebody else to pester? I got things to do. I got important things now. I guess I need you, but just wait in the wings for a minute. And objectifying people and playing the game and being the fraud and talking about, making jokes and laughing about Shakespeare and John Donne and all these people who I had only a passing experience with and had never read them, and everybody just assumed I'd read a lot. Charlie was real intellectual, Anybody can be an intellectual in the humdinger, trust me. A can of tomato juice is an intellectual in the humdinger, and I'm sorry if there's any humdinger graduates in here, but I include myself in that a lot. And so I was sick, and by June of 1981, last year, my drinking, I'd been I'd been working at this bookstore for 8 years. It was a stepping stone job. It just was a larger stone than I thought, and my wife had left. I had lived in a little converted garage. It seems like this is a common theme this weekend, converted garage homes. I lived in this converted garage for a little while, then I moved back to my mother's house in Anaheim, and I was living there, and I had to pay the mortgage on her house, and they lived there for 25 years. My father died when I was about 23, and they lived there for a long, long time, and the mortgage was probably $110, $120 a month, and I was 3 months behind immediately, because it's a lot of scratch to get together in one time when you're an alcoholic anyway. And I was in bills up to my neck. I tapped out my ex-wife's credit card, and she's divorcing me, and I'd been in therapy for 2 years, which was great fun. I don't knock therapy, but it was not working for me because it gave me information. I don't know about you, but I love information. I love it. I don't like new information, but I like information that I've chosen myself. And I like it. I like to stack it and fold it, and I like putting it over here for a while, and I'm looking at it, and then, no, I want it over here now, and then I'll just lend it to you. You read it, and let's talk about it. And I like flipping through it and alphabetizing it. I like everything about information except using it. And there's a hurdle I'm not ready to go over yet. And what I got in therapy was information from a well-meaning person who told me to be honest with my wife, who told me to be honest with my coworkers. And you cannot be honest if you are a drinking alcoholic. It is impossible to be honest. And I couldn't do it. And what am I going to tell her when she comes home from work? And I'm sitting there after about 5 glasses of whiskey. She said, "Hi, how was your day?" "Oh, it was great. I got up about an hour after you left and went down to Mac's liquor store, bought a couple of bottles of champagne because I'd been watching a David Niven movie the night before, and I got the champagne. It's about $1.80 a bottle, so don't be too impressed. And I got the champagne. I drank a couple of bottles of that. Went down to the Pussycat Theater in Torrance about noon just to catch the early showing of Donkey Lunch, and went in there and sat around there for a couple of hours and felt humiliated and deeply disturbed, and walked out, did something really disgusting in the car on the way home. Came by Mac's liquor store, bought some more whiskey, came home, cried for about 2 hours, listened to some sad records, and then went in and took a shower and started drinking again. How was your day? Co-workers, "Hey, Monday morning around the water cooler. How was your weekend?" "Terrific, terrific. I left work Friday night, got good and drunk before about 6 o'clock, started doing laundry." I'm a little compulsive about that. I figure if I'm doing laundry while I'm drinking, I'm not really drinking. And drank a lot, got sick, had to be taken to the hospital Saturday morning. I was puking up all kinds of weird stuff. And then the next day, I got a little bit better. Called my buddy John. We went down to the Humdinger down in Orange County, drank there from about 2 in the afternoon till about 2 in the evening, actually, or 2 in the morning. Went home. I felt sick. John passed out in the kitchen. I woke up the next morning in my mom's nightgown. John was laying with his face stuck to this cherry brandy on the counter, looking like some fly trying to his last legs to get out of the thing. He'd urinated all over the floor. I cleaned that up, threw him out, took my sweater to the dry cleaner to see if they could get the chunks out. Came home, the sun started setting last night, and I felt like the loneliest human being on earth. I can't tell you how I wanted to die inside, because I knew that everybody else was home with their families and enjoying their life, and I could not get it together one more time, and I'd screwed up. And so now I'm out at 9 o'clock trying to get the change out from between the seats of my car so I can go down to the liquor store again and get a bottle of port wine, because it's 19%, not 13% alcohol, and I can drink that, and I can pass out, and I'll be at work today. How was your weekend? Can't be honest. So I got brought to Alcoholics Anonymous by my sister-in-law. She had been in a treatment center for about a month, or she couldn't have been a month. She was 22 days sober when she 12-stepped me. And I owe my life, without any drama here, to a woman with 22 days of sobriety. She sat down and told me what she knew with the 22 days. And at the time, I had about 3 days. And all I heard was that I found a way to not drink. And I quit drinking because I was going to commit suicide, and I couldn't do it. And I'd gotten stuck on that fence between wanting to do it and not wanting to live and not wanting to die, and stuck right there at the moment. I heard Gene say it the morning at this convention when I was newly sober. He said that an alcoholic reaches that point in his life where they put a drink in front of him, and he thinks, if I drink it, I'll die, and if I don't drink it, I can't go on living. And I hope if you are here today and you're new, that you have reached that point, because we have an answer for you. We have a way that you can get out of that. And what happened was she brought me to this Alcoholics Anonymous meeting because what she had told me was hope. And I hadn't had any hope for a long time. I was able to manufacture hope on it. It was synthetic hope. All alcoholics can drum up hope at any given moment. The hope that check is going to be a day late before it hits the bank so you can spend the money. The hope, we live on hope, that kind of hope. I hope she comes back, because now I'm sober and I have no money. Once I get cleaned up and get it back together, she's dismissed. But I never had real hope in my life. And I came to AA and I didn't have any hope either. I walked in that first meeting and thought, loser-rama, look at this crowd. This is really sad. Because there were all kinds of races and creeds and colors and backgrounds, people sitting around, and it just all looked really odd to me. How could I have sunk so low to be an Alcoholics Anonymous? But I thought maybe I can pick up some pointers here. How much toast to eat before you go out drinking. I thought that's what Alcoholics Anonymous was. They would give you those actuary tables about how much your body weight is, and if you do that, you can take a certain amount of drinks a certain hour and figure it all out, and you can drink successfully. And I heard the word abstinence at my first meeting, and that threw me all off, and I didn't want to be there. And I heard this guy Ron from San Pedro talk. I remember his name, and I don't remember a whole lot of what he said, but he sounded brilliant, because I identified with his drunk-a-log. I thought the way he tried to solve his problems while he was drinking, now that's a guy who knows how to think. And I was told later that I should probably be trying to identify with the recovery a little more. but I didn't want to identify with the recovery because I didn't think I really had that kind of a problem. I'm a little bit different. I'm a little overeducated. I wasn't. I have a little more potential. I still have that ember burning inside. I'm going to stay here, fan it for a while, and when it ignites again, I'm out of here. And people kept saying, come back. Keep coming back. People were kind to me. I sat at that meeting for that hour and a half, and I don't remember anything really specifically about that meeting except this. That was that I was safe right in the middle of that meeting. I was safe. I don't know who I was sitting between, but it was two of you, and I felt like I wasn't going to have to drink if I sat there, just sat there and didn't get up. Take a hint. Anyway, I was just sure that if I stayed in that seat, I'd be all right, you know, and I didn't believe it after I left there. I didn't think it was the meeting, but you know what? Something had happened to me that night, and I believe it was an outcropping of the traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous, far more than it was the steps. And I don't diminish the steps because the steps are essential to staying sober, and you must do the steps. You must do the steps, all of them in order, every day. Not all 12, and during the day you'd be exhausted, but it's just do them. But the traditions were in place right there, as they are here, in that somebody showed up early and they made coffee. Somebody showed up early and they put out cookies. Someone showed up early and they sat at the chairs. Someone showed up early and put the podium up and brought literature. Somebody else showed up early and you know, there were people there who had taken that nice sunny Sunday afternoon that they could have spent by themselves and came to this AA meeting and did that lonely duty of love that alcoholics do. You know, some of the people I respect the most in AA are the ones who get in the car and just drive to God knows where to just do it, you know. The people who come early and make the coffee are the ones that, you know, everybody bitches about the coffee. Very few people go right up to the coffee guy and say, you make good coffee, thank you. I needed a cup tonight. You know, but that's part, someone had done that, and they put all those things in place. They had done all those offices of love, as I like to think of them. It's almost like a monastic office, that they showed up without being pushed or without grudgingly showing up. They just showed up, and they did that. And their common welfare, our common welfare came first, that their personal recovery depended upon our unity. And because they did that, there was a place for a guy with 4 days sober, me, to walk into and feel safe right in the middle of that. And I owe Alcoholics Anonymous to participate with that level in my sobriety to try to make Alcoholics Anonymous a place where people can come and feel safe, where they can feel wanted and not ignored, where they can feel that there's hope and not just hear an endless procession of bitching at the podium. I heard an Al-Anon speaker say a couple months ago that we bring our problems to our sponsors and we bring our solutions to the podium, period. You know, that's because the podium is not the place to come up and, I mean, you can come up here and hurt if you're hurting over something, but it's the sponsor relationship that saved me. And I got Bill grudgingly, as I said, and Bill started me working, doing the steps, not working him so much. He just said what you've heard this weekend. He said everything you've heard this weekend. Be at the meetings early. Treat your commitments like they're a job. Not because AA needs you, because AA does not need you, sport. AA doesn't need you, but the people at the meeting are counting on you being there to do what you say you're going to do. So be there. And if you can't be there, get somebody to do that, because that is part of your sobriety if you want what you have today, if you want to stay sober. And so I did that. I didn't want to, but sincerity is no prerequisite for staying sober. Trust me. And I did that. I started going to the Pacific Group, and I started getting commitments there. And I started jumping in with both feet. And I lived in Anaheim, and I drove to the Pacific Group meetings. I'd get off work in Santa Monica, go to the Pacific Group, and then drive back to Anaheim every night, you know. And it was tiring, but you know what? My life started to get a little bit better. And I started to feel a little less fearful of going out and drinking again, because believe me, my obsession to drink has not left me. It is patient. It rears itself up every so often. It is never completely gone. And I was going to these meetings, and Bill suggested I get more active in the group. And I thought, how am I going to do that? You know, I'm doing everything I can. I'm working hard. I'm trying to pay my bills. I got so much debt I can hardly see straight. And I need to, how can I be more active in the group? And he said, I want you to move to the west side. Well, I had $120 rent for a house in Anaheim. I can't do that. You know, that's illogical when I can commute. It's a lot easier, and my old Volkswagen will make it, you know. And he said, well, I want you to do that. I think that's the wisest thing. I hated that. You know, I went over in this place we call the Projects in Venice, where it was like an AA kibbutz at the time. There were about 8 million people in our group living there. And I went there, and they had a cancellation on an apartment that day, and they had one for $300 some. So I called Bill and said, well, they got a cancellation. And he said, you go back there and you tell them you want that apartment. I said, I haven't even seen it yet. He said, I don't care. You want that apartment. Take it. So I went back and said, I'll take the apartment. You know, and then on that on that morning that I was supposed to move, I was terrified because I tried to get money out to rent a truck, and naturally my bank account rolled snake eyes that day. You just hear the sound of laughter from that automatic teller machine. You keep pushing the card in. Who are you kidding? It reads out on the thing. It was just short of saying, give us another card, and another one. And I went to Bill, and I was in tears that morning because I knew people were going to show up, the three that were going to help me, and he went over and got the truck, and he got some money and got the truck. And sure enough, at 9 o'clock that morning, there must have been 30 AAs there, and Julianne was one of them. And Julianne and 30 guys in our group, and 2 of the women from the group came over, and they said, where's your new apartment? Give us the key to your new apartment, and we'll make sandwiches. And they went over to my apartment, and they made sandwiches for everybody. I paid them for the stuff, and they just went over and did that. And everybody showed up at my house and started moving my stuff. We had this truck completely loaded in an hour. We were moved into the apartment in 2 hours. And we all sat down, and everybody joined hands and said the Lord's Prayer, and we ate sandwiches together, and they all left, and I was in this new apartment, and I was in the Pacific Group, and I was in because I'd taken the action, and I was terrified to do that. But people made it easier for me. They walked with me. They didn't just tell me to do it and then turn around and walk away. They walked with me in this. And I started taking the steps that day because I had been taking the steps all along. I just didn't understand how. And it turns, I'm not up here to go through the steps with you one by one because I think that if you have a sponsor, your sponsor will show you how to do the steps through his or her example. And that there are as many ways to do the steps as there are people in this room. There are as many ways for God to contact us and make an impression on our lives as there are people in this room. But I'll tell you something. The steps are actions. They are not there to be analyzed. The steps are not meant to be necessarily worked. They're just meant to be taken. And sometimes we take them. I heard AA speakers for a long time thinking, I thought to myself, they worked them perfectly. They just went out that one day and made all those amends. And everybody cried and they all hugged. And there was money in the bank for them to write a check and hand it to them. And they walked out of there just, raring to go. And I can't do that. I tried to make amends to my ex-wife before I'd even done the third step. Have you ever been mugged by an amends? That's exactly what I did to her. By the time I was done, she thought we wanted to get married again. And that's not what I had in mind. And it hurt her. And I had to go back to my sponsor and say, I told you not to do that, but in your infinite wisdom, you did it. So let's just let it sit for now. And why don't you go back and do the third step? And he would call me every morning for my first few months. This is before I moved. He would be up in Northridge. He was a milkman at the time, and he was up in Northridge. And he would call me down in Orange County at 5 o'clock in the morning to wake me up. And he would tell me to get on my knees next to the bed and say the Lord's Prayer and try to say the third step prayer. Now, one of the great regrets, and I know it's not cool to have regrets in AA, but I think one of my regrets was that I really lost a lot of memory drinking. I used to be able to memorize long passages of things. I used to think that I wanted to be a theater arts major, and I could memorize lots of stuff, and I have burned out my memory completely. And I tried so hard to learn that third step prayer by heart, and I could not do it. I had to carry the card around. I had to fumble for the card and put it on my bedspread and pray to the bedspread because there was no God, that's for sure. But I just did it anyway. I didn't believe that there was a God. I just believed that Bill was on the other end of the line. And I had to do that, And what happened was I had come to believe that a power greater than I was could restore me to sanity. Because when I went to the meeting that night, I always felt better when I left. And I'd been restored back to some level of comfort in my life. And that I made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the power of God as I understood Him because I did exactly what Bill said. We've heard people talk about that this morning. I just did it. I didn't have any fight in me left. And I hope if you're new that your resistance dies before you do. Because I've seen resistance kill more alcoholics than anything. Just a resistance to anything, just a little bit. If I resist anything for too long, I'm out of here. And I made friends at the meetings. I see Casey's here. It's good to see him. Casey was one of the people that tried to humble me in AA. He and Robert Kilgore would, right before the Lord's Prayer, they would spit in their hands, and they'd be on either side of me, and they'd grab my hand during the Lord's Prayer. Casey would commonly walk up and say, "Good to see you, Charlie," and he'd lick his fingers and wipe my glasses with them. And I started to I finally learned to laugh. And I started laughing at myself and started enjoying being around you guys. And I started to go through the steps and took my inventory and started sponsoring people. And that's been one of the great benefits of being a sober alcoholic is the ability to, the honor of being asked to sponsor people. Because a lot of them didn't stay, but that's not what it's all about. It's not a numbers game. It's not a matter of me being able to tell how many people I sponsor. It's just, quiet, honey. Uncle Charlie loves you. But the crawl space under my house is full. Bill started giving me direction that I did not believe in. It's the same thing that you've heard already, that he told me to go back to school because I was bitching about my job, and in order to buy the right to bitch, I had to go back to school. And I didn't want to go back to school because I had a miserable experience. I'd gotten a degree in journalism, I immediately threw it in a drawer and never wanted to look at it again or ever set foot in a classroom again. And he sent me back to grad school, and through the help of other people, I wound up getting classes, and I got a loan to go there, amazingly got a loan, and I started going to graduate school. And again, I developed, through my experience in Alcoholics Anonymous, a love for learning and a love for listening. And I learned how to listen to people. And I started to catch fire over things like literature and poetry and that stuff. And whatever it is that you do well in your life, you're going to catch fire over it when you stay sober long enough and start taking the steps. You're going to get the fire ignited again to enjoy and recommit yourself to what it is that God would have you do. And you'll find out what that is over a long period of time of wandering, trying to figure out what it is. I got offered a job to teach college. The very college that I was working at the bookstore, where that bookstore was, I started teaching a class in the mornings. And Bill came over the first day before I was gonna start, and this is when I was about 2 years sober. And he said, you know what, I know you're scared, and I know you're really nervous about going into that classroom tomorrow morning, but I'll tell you something, that you are not going in there alone. You're going in there with all of the friends in AA that you have, with all the experience that people have in AA, and people are looking to you to fulfill that experience, to follow it through. And when you go up in front of that class tomorrow morning, just remember that God's hand is against the small of your back. You know, you're held up there by God's grace, and you're in there. And you may find out tomorrow that you're not meant to be a teacher. They may crucify you in there. They may ruin you. And you'll walk out of there saying, I'm not meant to be a teacher. And then you'll know. But you have a choice here. You can either go in and do that and find out you shouldn't be a teacher, or you can sit in the back room of that bookstore and price pencils till you're 70 years old and wonder if you could have ever cut it. You know, that's not how we live in AA. We take the chance, the opportunity. And I've been pushed through that. You know, I wound up being a high school teacher at 3 years sober, which is really a luge ride into the toilet sometimes. But I learned to just enjoy people that I had never been around before, teenagers, you know, and learn how to use the steps, particularly 9 and 10. You know, and very often 11, especially when you're confronted with someone. I have found ways. You know, I'll tell you a story. I had a student. It was I don't teach anymore, but he wasn't one of my students. He was a student at this Catholic school I was teaching at, and they weren't supposed to be in the hallways during lunch break or during breaks. They're supposed to be outside. And so I heard talking outside my room one afternoon at lunchtime. I opened the door and looked outside, and there's this young man standing there with this young girl, and he's trying to impress her, and he's talking to her. And I said, "Excuse me, but you're supposed to be outside the building right now." And he gave me one of those teenager looks. You know, that kind of, it's almost an imperceptible one of these, you know, that kind of a snap of the neck, and it pissed me off. And I said, I think you better take your book bag and go downstairs with everybody else, because you know it's a rule here that you're not supposed to be in the hallway. And he walked over as slowly as he could, and he picked up his book bag, never taking his eyes off of me, and he held his book bag up, and he turned around as slowly as he could and looked at his girlfriend. Then he looked at me again, and I said, look, why don't you take your tough guy act and go run it on some people who give a damn, because it doesn't impress real people. And why don't you get the hell out of here? And he looked shocked. He turned around and walked out, and I shut the door to my room, and I went, yes! 10 seconds later, I felt so bad I could hardly stand myself. Because what I learned this from Clancy, and Clancy's been a big influence in my life, that you do not treat people who don't have power unfairly like that. He had no power to say anything back to me. You know, and it is as much a 12-step call to treat people with respect in our day-to-day lives as we do in Alcoholics Anonymous. I can't walk out of here and treat people like crap out there and treat them like they're my servants or they're my lessers or that they're supposed to make some exception for me because I'm trying to stay sober. You know, I don't drink today. I've had it rough. If you only knew. I can't do that, and I felt really terrible about this kid, so I went back outside because I knew what to do. And I look out there, and he's gone. I looked out in the yard, and all the 1,000 kids out there, and I couldn't find him. He wasn't one of my students, and I thought, oh, damn it, you know. I've done it again. I've shot my mouth off. I've done exactly what I do when I'm afraid or when I've been challenged. I hurt people. You know, it made me feel terrible. It was the first time I really felt terrible sober like that. And I went in my room, and the next day I was sitting in my room grading papers at lunch break, and I heard on my door, and I looked up, and there's a little window in the door, and here's this guy. And I thought, uh-oh. And I motioned for him to come in, and he walked inside, and he walked right up to my desk, and he said, my name is Anthony, and I want to say I'm very sorry if I upset you yesterday. I'm going to be graduating from here in about 4 months, and I don't want any bad blood between me and a teacher here. And I was wrong, and I apologize. So let's not have any hard, can we have not have any hard feelings? And he put his hand out, and I couldn't shake it because I was that big. But this kid demonstrated something to me that I could not have experienced it was just such an odd lesson, and he would come back every year after he graduated for a couple of years and tell me how he was doing in college, Isn't that an odd thing, a funny thing? That somebody who can be as nasty as I can in my natural state can have someone who would come back and be that interested in reporting what he's doing in his life. And I stopped teaching and actually became a writer a couple of years ago, which was really something really unusual. Oh, don't clap. I mean, I am not what I do for a living. I am a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous first, and I have to remember that because things can change tomorrow. And they have been changing. I got a big resentment with a person at work. I helped get a woman hired who I now report to. It's irritating because she has a difficult personality, and I have a personality conflict with her. And so every day I have to go into that job, and I know I've been told this by Joe. Told me this one time. He said, "Never share anything that's occurred to you in the last 3 weeks." But about a month ago, I had to start trying to pray for this person. I've been having trouble with it, And I don't work this program perfectly. I do it haltingly, and I do it awkwardly, and I do it clumsily, but I just do it. I've paid back the money. I've made the amends as best I can. Some amends other people have had to come to me with first and break the ice. I've learned how to love people in AA in the same way that I was loved. Love is not an emotion, it's an action. And my dad, my father never saw me sober. My father died when I was about 23, as I said, and he used to get up every morning and he would iron my shirt for me for school. And he would make a lunch for me and put it in a bag and set it by the door. And then he would go to work. He had to go be at work at 6 o'clock. And every day he did that when I was in school. And I would put that shirt on, and I would go out of that house with that lunch, and when I hit the schoolyard, on my way into the schoolyard, I'd throw that lunch in the trash can because it wasn't cool to carry your lunch. Cool kids bought their lunch. And I would rather not eat and act like I bought my lunch than have to carry a bag lunch. I'd throw my father's lunch in the trash can. I felt terrible guilt about that. I did it for years. And I knew I had been a big disappointment to him. And I'll tell you how AA works here, and that is that we are monkey see, monkey do around here. And I heard Clint, who participated earlier, talking about making amends to his mother. And I made amends to my mom, and I made amends to my mother by inviting her back into my life. Inviting her with open arms back into my life and trying to be a son to her, even though we don't agree on a lot, but we made a little truce, and we never discussed anything that's occurred in the 20th century. But I heard Clint talk about making amends to his dad, or his mother. So I was at an Al-Anon function. This is a few years ago, and I was leaving I was with my girlfriend at the time, and I was taking separate cars, and I was going home, and I realized I was within about 5 miles of my dad's grave, and I hadn't been there for 20 years. And Bill, my sponsor, had told me, you have to make amends to your father. It's essential that you do that. So I found out where he was. I went to the cemetery, and I found out where he was buried. And I went across the street to the store, and I did exactly what I heard Clint say he did. I bought some scissors. I bought some paper towels. I bought some cleaning fluid. I bought some carnations because I knew my father loved carnations. And I took that stuff, and I went across the place, and I found his grave in the cemetery, and I sat down and trimmed it up and cleaned it off, and it was in pretty good shape. And I sat there and just did what Bill instructed me. And I started talking to him. And I told him how sorry I was that I hadn't been able to take down that wall that separates me from everybody, Everything, my whole life has been just an attempt to hold that wall up so that I can't let you get too close because it'll hurt too much if you get too close. Somehow I'm going to get hurt. And I keep that wall up. And I've come to realize in sobriety that God's will is taking the wall down, sometimes a brick at a time, sometimes a whole bunch of bricks, sometimes just a pebble at a time to get that wall down. Anything that opens up the communication and the message between you and me is God's will, and anything that doesn't isn't God's will as far as I'm concerned. And I went there and did that, and I talked to my father, and I said, I'm sober now, and I'm sure you were concerned with me, because he'd been concerned about my drinking even when I was 20. And I'm sure that I've been a big disappointment to you, and I've always felt like I let you down, and I had big expectations on you, and I always felt that you would let me down. I've come to realize how much you mean to me. Through the goodness of people in AA, I came to recognize goodness, because you cannot experience love until you learn to love somebody else yourself. And once you have recognized that, then you can recognize it anywhere. Once you recognize it in Alcoholics Anonymous, you can carry that out there. And I did that. I sat and talked to him for about 20 minutes. I got in the car and drove off, and no cloudburst or anything, no big deal, no big dramatic moment. But I'll tell you something, from that day until today, I've never felt guilty about my father. And it has occurred to me in my daily prayer and meditation that my father never felt bad about me anyway. My father loved me without any problem at all. He never judged me for being less than what I thought that he thought I should be. He just loved me as a son, And wherever he is, he's probably just chuckling to himself that I would even feel that way. Or maybe he's hurt somewhere about my feeling that way. But whatever it is, I made my amends to him. And I've come back and done that. And I'm sorry, I've gone over. I'm going to wrap this up. Alcoholics Anonymous is more than just a whole bunch of nice people talking nice about nice things. Alcoholics Anonymous is a program of action, that you don't even need to understand. You don't need to study the big book. You just need to read it over and over again, and eventually it will become a meaningful thing to you. But you don't need to know what Bill meant by although. It's a subordinating conjunction is what it is, if I may be so brash. Doesn't mean anything, you know? And I learned, when I was 11, I learned how to ride a bicycle, and I didn't understand anything about riding bicycles. I didn't understand anything about AA. I understood AA when I was 3 years sober. I understood everything about AA when I was 3 years sober. The problem is, in the last 11 years, everything's leaked out somewhere, and it's been replaced by experience, which I hate. I'd much rather operate on theory. And theory's clean. It doesn't leave any fingerprints. I better not stay out of that one. Anyway, I learned how to ride a bicycle from a guy named Irv, and I did not want to learn to ride the bike. I just wanted to ride it. I just want to get on and pop a wheelie and take off. And I had this bike. I got it for Christmas. It was midsummer. It was in my garage. And Irv came by and asked me if I wanted to learn how to ride it. And so I went out and got on the bike. And he said, you pedal and steer, and I'll hold the back of the bike. And you'll learn how to ride the bike. I won't let you fall. So, okay, I got on the back of the bike. I got on the bike, locked knees, locked elbows, started pedaling, you know, steering every 2 seconds, checking to see if Irv's there. And Irv's walking along, you're doing fine, you're doing fine. And we walked about 2 blocks and came back. And, you know, the first lesson, I went in and toweled off. And I was exhausted because it was a real stress period. And then he came back the next day. You want to ride again? No. I didn't come out that way. I said, yeah. And I got on the bike, and Irv said, you pedal and steer, and I'll hang on to the rack in the back, and I'm not going to let you fall. Let's go. So we went a couple blocks more and came back. We did the same thing about 3 or 4 days in a row. Pretty soon I started to get limbered up. You know, I'd hop on that bike and, you know, okay, Irv, take your position. And Irv would get there, and he'd say, you know what, okay, yeah, you'll hold on, so don't let me fall. And I start pedaling. I'm pedaling now. Now I've gotten some confidence. You know, I've been doing this a few days. So I start going a little faster just to see what Irv's made out of, you know. And I'm getting going pretty good, and I look over, and Irv's gone, you know. And I panicked. I glanced over my shoulder, and he's about 2 blocks back, waving in the middle of the street. And I flipped because, well, first of all, he hadn't taught me how to turn. So I had to take that bike. I had to ride that bike. It's like turning a wagon train around. You got to go about 90 miles, you know, it's a degree at a time to get back. I rode all around that neighborhood. You know what? I've been riding that bicycle ever since then without a thought about it. And you know what? I didn't know anything about the principles that are absolutely necessary to ride a bicycle. I knew nothing about physics. I was 10 years old. I hardly knew how to, you know, do anything. Didn't know anything about physics, inertia, momentum. I knew nothing about the importance of inner ear balance to riding a bicycle. I knew nothing about how important it is to spoke the wheels properly so they're balanced, so the wheel turns properly. All of those principles are absolutely essential to ride a bicycle. You cannot ride a bicycle if any one of those is missing. It's impossible. But all I knew was if I get on and pedal and steer, Irv will hang on to the back and he won't let me fall. That's all I knew. And if you're new here today, and I know there are some new people here, all we're asking you to do is get on the bike and you pedal and steer, and we'll hang on to the back and we're not going to let you fall. Believe me, we'll walk with you as far as you need to go till you start understanding that by pedaling and steering, you'll start to somehow get it beyond my ability to teach you. But you'll get it like I did. And we don't want anything for that. We don't want your money. We don't want anything. We don't want your last name if you don't want to give it. We don't want anything except, well, we want one thing. We want you to come back tomorrow, and we want you to find the most frightened looking person in the room, or the one who looks like he's hurting, or the one who looks like he knows better than to be there. And you invite him to get on the bicycle and pedal and steer, and you hang on to the back and walk with him until he learns how to ride it. Because at a certain point, you'll know, and you'll be able to let him go, and he'll be riding it by himself. You know? And that's up to me. It's up to me to let go of the bike. Actually, it was up to Irv. Because if it had been up to me, I'd still be having Irv hang on to the back riding in Venice right now. You know, I'd just, Irv, come on, get that wheelchair over here and let's go. But all we ask of you is this. Come back to Alcoholics Anonymous tomorrow. Believe what you hear from this podium. If it didn't work, we wouldn't be here. You pedal and steer. We'll hold on to the back. Both of us will stay sober. God bless you, and thank you for letting me stay.